Today we're talking about double stacking. Now a few of you have asked me on my mage video why I think double stacking is so bad. I've heard some things about hunters double stacking in the past, stuff like that. Most of you know that double stacking is considered bad, but most people don't know why. And that is exactly what we're going to address here. First of all, let's talk about which roles can even consider double stacking at all. So out of the roles that we have, one that clearly shouldn't ever double stack are guardians in a support role. Obviously, there is Height of the Urchin, which is also a stacking item, but that's really the only one that they should be getting with permanent stacks. Other stacking items, magical stacking items like Warlock, Sash or Book of Thoth don't make sense for characters that are basically responsible for taking care of somebody else clearing the wave and not clearing the wave themselves. Supports shouldn't get last hits in combination with Watcher's Gift, so no reason for them to ever build them. Solo laners. Solo laners really don't get much benefit out of those stacks. You will see the occasional Warlock Sash on a magical solo laner. For example, if you're playing Hades in solo, and that's pretty much about it. There's no point in double stacking there. The warriors, even less so. You're not going to scale well with Transcendence. You're not going to make any use out of this Devourer's Gauntlet, so really no reason for solo laners to do it. Junglers. I've recently addressed that in the Transcendence video. There is no point in stacking on junglers. Maybe a little bit of a point can be made for Ao Kwang as the only jungler who has a bit of a reason to stack with either Doom or Book of Thoth, but even that's more of a niche scenario, which I personally don't really prefer. Other junglers really don't make use of stacking items. Neither Devourer's Gauntlet and also not Transcendence, because it just doesn't help them as much as other items at this point. This leaves us with two classes and two roles. Mages and hunters. Let's first talk about hunters, because hunters is a little simpler. There is no reason for hunters to double stack for a very particular number behind it. If you look at hunters and how they work in the game, they usually have a weak early game and then transition into a very strong late game and basically develop their power over the course of the game. So as such, double stacking doesn't sound completely illogical, simply because, you're building up power for later on. Now the problem here is that you don't really do that. First of all, if you double stack, for example, say you're starting with Death Toll, building Devourer's Gauntlet, going into Boots and then in Transcendence, or starting with Transcendence and then going into Boots and then Devourer's Gauntlet or whatever, it's always going to be bringing you in a position where the enemy can trade better. They will have Ikaival or something like that, and they will be ahead in terms of boxing potential for a long time. And you can't really make up for that later down the road. And that is because there is no way to fit both items into a late game build and have the strongest possible build. If you're going for an ability-based build, you're looking to finish the game earlier most of the time anyways, because ability-based builds are really not for late game. In late game, you want to have as much DPS as possible, because you're going to trade a lot more and you're going to try and burst down enemy squishies and not so much look for ability poke, because abilities won't be enough to one-shot somebody anymore, basically. Ullr is a bit of an exception here, but even he does not make as much use of so much raw power. If you're looking for ability damage, what you're looking for at a certain point is penetration. And as such, what you usually ditch is the Devourer's Gauntlet. You're going for Transcendence, and then you're looking for penetration, and some of that is going to be an RC, for example, in order to get your lifesteal going as well. In that regard, there's no situation where it would really be favorable to build both, because if you do, you might as well replace one of them with Baller's Beatstick and you would actually end up with more ability damage. So even though they have more power in late game, that would still result in less damage. On the other hand, you could argue with DPS here. If you're looking for a DPS build, same thing, you got a lot of power that way and maybe that would work, but really it doesn't. As a matter of fact, if you're combining Malice, Deathbringer, and Transcendence, you will always come out with less damage than if your third item was Wind Demon. Because Wind Demon, as soon as it procs, does a lot more in terms of DPS for you and even has nearly the same DPS without being procced. And with a 60% crit chance, you're going to be able to proc it from time to time. So, triple crit does more DPS than double crit in Transcendence. And as such, you are better off just looking for earlier, faster crit online instead of going for double stacking and then slowly trying to come up with a build or come online with a build that in the end will still be weaker than if you went the other round, which will be expensive obviously, but functions very much in the same way and gets you to the same results only quicker. So in conclusion for hunters, you're going to lose out on DPS if you double stack, and you're also gonna lose out on early game potential, and you're also gonna lose out on ability damage late game. So there is really no reason to do it. But let's look at mages. Mages are a bit of a different field. Now, if you were to double stack on a mage, you would always build Warlock Sash first. Warlock Sash needs more stacks, it brings more benefit to actually have it stacked early in the match, and stuff like that. So Warlock Sash would be the first one to go. And now we're already in a bit of an awkward spot because we need some items. You're not going to be able to start the game without a starter item in most cases, so you will have your Soulstone. Then you will maybe start with the tier 1 of Warlock Sash, ideally, and then you're probably going to finish your Pen Boots and then your Warlock Sash. At this point, you most likely already need some percentage pen, because most likely someone on the enemy team will have started building magical defense, and if you want to burst them still, then you need your penetration. So you're gonna go for Obsidian Shard. After that would maybe be an opportunity to fit in a second stacking item. However, there's Rod of Tahuti, and Rod of Tahuti, while being roughly 700 gold more expensive, will give you pretty much the same damage as Book of Thoth with full stacks on Book of Thoth. So you pay a little more, but there's no stacking involved, and it brings you to the maximum power that you can achieve with Book of Thoth. So I would probably still go for Rod first. And then you could go for Book of Thoth. The point with Book of Thoth is that it's not so problematic to build it late, because the stacks don't matter that much. Most of the damage comes from the mana. So yeah, it's alright to build it in this point. But still, you want to stack it anyways to get the maximum potential out of it. And that kinda, puts it in an awkward spot. In a full build, you will hardly have more damage than many other options. If you were to build Spear of Desolation instead, it would almost be the same damage. If you were to build Gem of Isolation instead, it would be a little damage decrease, but you get the slow on top of your ability kit. So yeah, you could get very high damage numbers, but what do you pay for it? You pay the price of time, and that is basically meaning you're gonna be ineffective for most of the match. A mid lane mage is usually expected to come online very early into the game, as soon as he has his ultimate, and become effective and have an impact on the game, because otherwise why play him in mid lane, not put him in a farm lane. So you kind of looking for early aggression whenever possible, you're looking for early secures, all that kind of stuff, and that's what you need a mage for, not for the late game. For the late game you got hunters or you got carries in general. Yes, mages are still impactful late game, but it's not their strongest point of the game compared to hunters. So why would you spend all game trying to get to your ideal numbers, basically to the highest damage possible, delaying yourself in terms of kill potential, in terms of objective secure potential and all that stuff, when in the end there are other options that basically provide you with the same thing, or even better. With Spear of Desolation, for example, it's pretty much the same damage numbers. However, Spear of Desolation also has an added passive on top of that, which helps you a lot more late game, as it will reset your cooldowns to some extent. So, while Book of Thoth is great in terms of raw damage, it doesn't offer you the same utility that other items would late game, and there's just not much of a point in building it over it. Often you will need some kind of situational item, maybe Divine Rune or something like that. Sometimes you will even need something linked to counter burst, like Magic's Blessing, if it's against an Ao Kuang and stuff like that. So, really, the potential of even going into double stacks is so low, and it does so little for you. You can theoretically do it on Kukulkan or maybe Thoth if you're really looking for the highest number possible and you want to ditch every other situational item in the build. But then why? Why significantly weaken the strongest phase of the game for you just to be more effective if the game goes on for a very long time? Damage is great, but damage isn't all in Smite. There are a lot of situations that have to be considered. And just stupidly building these double stacks really doesn't help you in, let's say, 95% of the cases. There's always the odd case out, but it's so rare that really I don't see enough of a point to recommend any double stacking builds. And this especially goes for modes outside of Conquest, where you really don't have enough time to even make use of those stacks. If you double stack in Arena, you're probably just gonna be done stacking by the time that the Arena match finishes or something like that, unless there's a ridiculous amount of kills that you're participating in, which mostly won't be the case. So overall, there is not enough of a reason to really fit it in. The numbers will never be much better than other items, and the benefits you're losing in return and across the time in the match will not be able to make up for that. I hope this explains why I really don't think that double stacking is very helpful on most characters. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you for the next video tomorrow, If you're interested, I will be streaming on Twitch TV/DukesLoth right now that the new patch is up. DukesLoth, out.